Daphne, a place one would imagine as being quite beautiful. It was, after all, one of the villages of the kingdom Zashtoreth. As everyone in that time knew, Zashtoreth was one of the most beautiful places one could ever imagine. And yet, if one were to enter Daphne, you couldn't possibly be in that wonderful land now, could you? Not with such a disaster as this. If one were to enter Daphne now, one would have believed that it was never much to look at. The truth is, Daphne was once a beautiful place. In fact, it was probably the most beautiful of the smaller communities. It was a circular village with polished stone pathways leading from house to house. The houses, like the pathways, were also made of stone, although of an older generation. These stones, limestone to be exact, once glittered in the moonlight and on summer days. At the time, most of the houses were half covered by dark, rich sprays of English ivy, which was above all quite a lovely effect. Of the houses were thatched once every autumn with weeds. In the middle of the village, a small spring gushed forth fresh, clear water. The small fountain was surrounded by the same polished stones used to create the walkways, and tiny wildflowers poked their heads between them. Next to the spring, an old twisted tree with white bark stood. No one quite knew what type of tree it was, but it produced quite a display of purple and white flowers in the early seasons. Seemingly overnight, the tree would produce its blossoms. The villagers would hold a spring festival. Flowers blossomed and wild carrots and asparagus were planted in the gardens. Every villager threw open their shutters to the aroma of humus and lilac, which put them in high spirits. The sound of birds filled the air. Sparrows built their nests. Spring was always the favorite season. When the blossom of the old white tree began to fall, to the villagers that meant that spring had come to an end and that summer had begun. They held a celebration that night. The sight of all those petals drifting in the gentle breeze like summer snow was whimsical. The children would run around barefoot, laughing, trying to catch them before they landed in the soft grass. Autumn was no less a beautiful sight. When autumn arrived in Daphne, the leaves of the trees turned the most brilliant arrays of colors one could ever imagine. It was a sight to behold. The fruits of the trees were ripe, and the women of the village used them to bake pies and crisps for their husbands and children. Daphne was like a miniature paradise, but, as of now, one could have never imagined it. Entering the village would be like entering a tomb. All is silent and forgotten, as though nobody has ever lived there or will ever live there again. The stones, now much older, are covered in lichen and moss from the ages. The ivy is no longer there. It is as though they have disappeared from its existence. The polished stones are no longer polished or intact. The grass is overgrown in weeds. The call of crow is heard in the distance, that is all. At night an owl, that is all. Perhaps the occasional bat comes out into the starlight in search of food. The chirp of a cricket is not there to break the silence. During the day the air is still, except for the low hum of flies. The trees within the village are either rotting or charred as though they had once been on fire. All except one. In the center of the village, the old twisted white tree, untouched by flame or foe, still stands. Beneath him, the spring still flows.